Welcome to my channel. It really means a lot to me to subscribe to the channel. Okay, gather round, folks. Let me tell you a story. It's not a grand adventure story or a thrilling mystery, but it's a story that honestly, I wish someone had told me ages ago. And it's a story about well, it's a story about you. Or rather, it's a story about the amazing, slightly weird, and totally hackable piece of equipment sitting right there in your head. See, I'm a neuroscientist, which sounds fancy, but mostly means I spend my time poking around in brains and the nerves that run through your body. I'm also a lecturer trying to teach the next bunch of health pros. And honestly, it used to make me so angry, like genuinely ticked off. Why? Because I'd watch students, especially the ones who weren't exactly spring chickens anymore, really struggle with learning. And the worst part, it wasn't their fault. Nobody ever taught them how to learn. We just sort of expected it to happen, right? There's this myth, this curse almost, that learning just gets harder as you get older. And yeah, okay, there's some truth to that. We'll get to it. But what if I told you there are actual, science-backed things you can do? Things that can make you learn faster, and heck, even better because there are. And once I figured them out, drawing on neuroscience, the anger faded a bit, replaced by this burning desire to share the secrets. So, settle in. Let me spill the beans on the 6 fundamental ingredients, or think of them as brain hacks, that can seriously upgrade your learning game. We're going to talk about attention, alertness, sleep, repetition, rest, and yes, even mistakes. But first, we need to understand the absolute bedrock of it all. Chapter 1, Your Brain's Squishy Superpower. Okay, before we dive into the hacks, let's get a little bit geeky for just a second. Promise it'll be quick. How do we actually learn anything? Whether it's some fact for a test or a physical skill like riding a bike? The secret sauce, the fundamental thing that has to happen, is something called neuroplasticity. Now, don't let the big word scare you. Neuroplasticity, in plain English, just means your brain's physiological ability to change in response to whatever you're experiencing. Think of your brain not as a hardwired machine, but as something more like, well, plastic. I guess it can be molded, changed, reshaped. When you learn something new, here's what's happening down at the microscopic level. Tiny connections, called synapses, are forming between neighboring brain cells. Imagine your brain cells' neurons are little islands, and learning is building little bridges between them. The more you do that thing, whether it's recalling that fact or practicing that skill, the stronger those specific bridges get. And the stronger the bridges, the better you get at whatever it is you're doing. Simple, right? I actually saw this happen once. I was looking at some neurons in a Petri dish. Yeah, I know, glamorous life. And honestly, I was about to toss the dish. Just standard lab stuff. But then I saw them, these 2 neurons, just starting to reach out to each other. I swear I scrambled to hit record as fast as I could. What I saw were these amazing, hand-like structures. They're called growth cones, and every single one of the 86 billion neurons in your head has them. They're not just sitting there, they're actively sensing their environment. They help guide each neuron to the right spot to connect. Like, okay, connect here ... or maybe here instead. Now, just to be clear, that specific Petri dish moment, that was the brain connecting up during development. It's how your brain gets wired in the first place. And if there are problems or glitches in that wiring process, yeah, that can absolutely cause issues with learning and memory acquisition later on. But the principle is the same. Learning is about making and strengthening connections. Chapter 2, The Curse of the Not-So-Young Brain. Alright, let's talk about that whole learning gets harder as you get older thing. We all say it, right? Kids are sponges. They seem to just soak everything up, languages, skills, sports, you name it, they pick it up fast. And then you meet someone who's just ridiculously good at something. You know the type. And you think, man, they must have some secret sauce, some natural gift the rest of us missed out on. But here's the thing, what if I told you that's probably not true? Most of the time, it comes down to practice, persistence. And key point, they often started learning that skill way back when they were little. Think about the big names the source mentioned, Serena Williams, Beethoven. Were they just born with a tennis racket or a piano keyboard in their hands? Nope, they practiced. And get this, they both seriously got started when they were about 5 years old. So yeah, the hard truth, our ability to learn really does start to drop off after about age 5. Yeah, cue the sad trombone sound effect. It gets significantly trickier through childhood and adolescence. And then, wham, around age 25, learning gets exponentially harder. But before you throw your hands up in despair and declare yourself too old to learn anything new, remember what I said at the start. There are things you can do, ways to fight back against this curse. Ways to help your amazing, squishy, plastic brain keep making those connections and learning faster and better. Let's talk about how, Chapter 3, the battle for brain space focus. First up on our list of brain hacks, attention. You gotta be paying attention to learn, right? It sounds super simple, almost dumb to mention. But honestly, it's maybe the most important thing. It's a ridiculously vital function. Here, try this. Close your eyes for a second. Okay, maybe read this first, then close your eyes. Now, just focus on where your feet are touching the floor. Seriously, try it. You'll probably notice things you didn't notice a second ago. The thickness of your socks, maybe? How tight your shoes are, how solid the floor feels. You weren't paying attention to that stuff a moment before, see? We have the power to choose what level of focus we put into something. And research shows that when we give something our full attention, our ability to hold onto that information goes way up. Especially for the long haul. But here's the problem. In the entire history of humanity, we have never had to work this hard to pay attention. Be honest. How many times today have you had to reread something or ask someone to repeat themselves because your mind was just ... Elsewhere, it happens to everyone, right? Our brains are basically designed to focus on one thing at a time. But thanks to the modern world, we're constantly context switching. Picking up your phone, scrolling through social media. You see news, an ad, a cat video, totally unrelated stuff, one after another. And this constant jumping around demonstrably reduces our attention span measurably. Now, I'm not saying it causes clinical ADHD or anything like that. But studies have shown that if teenagers spend more than an hour a day on their phones, it is linked to this kind of lack of focus. So maybe just try putting the phone down a little more often. Okay, your brain will thank you. If you want to build up your attention skills for the long term, there are techniques out there, like mindfulness meditation that focuses on attention. They can seriously improve your game, but if you need a quick boost right now for a study session or meeting, the fastest way to improve your attention is... Drumroll please ... exercise. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Oh, great, another doctor telling me to exercise and eat my veggies, but seriously, listen to me for a second. Do you know that exercise can actually increase the size of the parts of your brain involved in learning and memory? It even helps you create brand new brain cells. Studies consistently show that regular exercise improves memory, cognition, and your ability to think. And here's the really cool part, just moderate exercise. We're not talking about training for a marathon here. Even about 20 minutes of moderate activity, not even high intensity, will seriously improve your attention for about 2 hours afterward. So what should you do next time you're about to hit the books? Don't just plop down. Go for a quick run, do some jumping jacks. If you can manage a balanced exercise, even better. If you're at work, just sprint up and down the stairs a couple of times. There are so many little things you can do that can make a huge difference in getting that focus dialed in. Chapter 4, the adrenaline jolt getting your alertness on. Alright, next up on our brain hack list, alertness, again, sounds obvious, right? You gotta be awake to learn. It's not rocket science. But here's the point. If you're not fully alert, you're going to have a harder time remembering information. Your brain just isn't in prime receiving mode. Our bodies have this built-in system called the fight or flight mechanism, also known as the sympathetic nervous system. When it gets activated, it releases chemicals like adrenaline and noradrenaline. And these guys, they crank up your alertness. So how can we boost this system a little bit without, constantly setting off an air horn like they did in the source video? Seriously, that scared me. Well, guess what? It's that same old song and dance exercise. It pops up again and again because it's just that good for your brain. You can also try certain breathing techniques, like the Wim Hof method. Or even just splash some cold water on your face after you shower. Trust me, that'll definitely wake you up. We also know that a little bit of stress has a similar effect. Sitting down to learn something right after you've had a little bit of stress, like I was feeling right before giving that talk, a bit anxious, it actually helps you learn better. A little stress is genuinely good. It helps you reach peak performance. And getting a little adrenaline boost after learning something can also improve your retention. Now, crucial caveat, I'm talking about a little stress here. Like the healthy kind that motivates you or puts you on edge for a moment. Because if you're dealing with too much stress or chronic stress, that's a whole different ballgame. Long-term, chronic stress physically changes your brain. And it causes serious problems with learning and memory. If you've gone through a period of prolonged stress, you've probably experienced memory impairment. It's just how it works, so hey, be kind to yourself. But a little bit of stress, that's your friend. Oh, and another way to boost alertness, you can consume things that help. Like this stuff ... holds up a coffee cup, maybe? ... caffeine. There's growing research showing that having caffeine before learning, or if you're a regular caffeine drinker anyway, can improve your learning and memory through various brain mechanisms. On the flip side, when you eat, especially a big meal, you're going to be less alert. That's because eating shuts down our fight or flight mechanism. So maybe don't plan your most important study session right after stuffing your face. One last thing about alertness. We can't be 100% on all the time. It's a little controversial, but there's research suggesting we go through these things called ultradian rhythms. Basically, every 90 minutes or so, we hit a peak of performance and then dip down. You're not going to be equally alert throughout your whole day. You're usually most alert in those 8 to 30-minute windows in the middle of the cycle. And guess what else keeps you alert? Yep, our next brain hack. Chapter 5, The Brain's Night Shift: Why Sleep is King. Okay, next essential ingredient for supercharged learning, sleep. Now, obviously, if you're struggling to sleep, you're not going to be very alert during the day. That's a no-brainer, but there's another, perhaps even more crucial reason why getting your shut-eye is absolutely vital for learning. Sleep does a million important jobs. It rebuilds your immune system, helps with metabolism, resets your emotional regulation. It even clears out waste products that build up in your brain during the day. Think of it as the brain's essential maintenance crew, but for learning? Sleep is massively important for memory consolidation. It's how you shift information from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. You've got this specific part of your brain called the hippocampus. It's really important for learning and memory. During the day, your hippocampus is kind of like a little diary. It keeps track of everything you do. If I asked you what you did right before reading this, you'd use your hippocampus to remember that. But it only holds onto that info for a short time. When you go to sleep, something magical happens. Those short-term memories in your diary, the hippocampus, get rapidly transferred to other parts of the brain, specifically the cortex, and they get turned into long-term memories. So here's the kicker: if you don't sleep, you can't make that transfer. Those short-term memories stay short-term, and then poof, they might just disappear. This is why pulling all-nighters to cram for a test. It's literally the worst way to learn for long-term retention. Seriously, you might get through the test, but that knowledge probably isn't sticking around. So, what's the takeaway here? Prioritize sleep. Make it more important than your study session before the session to be alert. But also prioritize sleep after the session. You need that sleep time for your brain to cement everything you just worked on. Sleep isn't downtime for learning, it's a critical part of the learning process. Chapter 6. The power of doing it again. Repetition is not boring, it's brain food. You know that old saying, practice makes perfect? Or maybe the one about the iron rod turning into a needle after enough sharpening? Well, turns out those old proverbs are scientifically spot on. Why? Because repetition is absolutely key when it comes to learning. End of story. Hearing or seeing something just one single time? That's usually not enough for your brain to hold onto it forever. Think of it like building muscle. You don't just lift a weight once and expect to be buff. Repeated patterns of thought or action, or repeated exposure to information, strengthen those connections and processes in your brain. It makes retrieval easier. Remember that neuroplasticity stuff? You're literally creating these brand new connections. And let me tell you, building those connections? It takes energy, it needs fatty acids, protein. It's a big, energy-hungry job for the brain. And your brain? It's kind of lazy in a good, efficient way. It doesn't want to spend all that precious energy building these fancy new connections if it's just for something you're only going to do one time, right? So, repetition, what does it do? At a cellular level, it basically signals to your brain, hey, this thing keeps showing up. This must be important. To be more efficient, I need to strengthen these pathways and get better at it. Here's how to apply this. When you're learning something, repeat it as much as you can during that initial learning session. But don't just do it all at once. Use spaced repetition. Spread your learning sessions out over several days. This gives your brain a chance to build on those new, freshly made long-term memories. Seriously, listen to this. To shorter learning sessions on different days? That's way more effective, significantly better results than taking the same total amount of time and doing it all in one go. Mind blown, right? Now, there's one weird exception. Sometimes you can learn something in just one go. Psychologists and neuroscientists call this one-trial learning. It happens when there's a super strong emotional component attached to the experience. Like if it makes you really happy, or really sad, or really scared, especially if it makes you scared. And honestly, that makes perfect biological sense when you think about it. Your brain wants to remember every single detail about that scary thing. That way, next time you encounter it, you know exactly how to react. Or maybe just how to completely avoid it forever. Although sometimes when something goes wrong in this process, you can end up with PTSD, which isn't great. But for most everyday learning, you need to repeat, spread it out. Give your brain the signal that this stuff is important and worth keeping. Chapter 7. The underrated art of doing nothing. Seriously, take a break. Okay, another crucial hack for learning, taking breaks. Yes, you heard me right. Stepping away from the material is incredibly important for learning. And there are two main reasons why. First, it gives your brain a chance to replay the information you just learned. This happens completely subconsciously. You're not even trying. Let's say you're practicing a sequence of notes on the piano. If you take a rest, even just like 10 seconds afterward, your brain literally does a neural replay. It replays that sequence. And researchers found that this replay can lead to you playing the sequence 20 times faster. How cool is that? And it seems like taking a slightly longer break, maybe 10 to 20 minutes afterward, is even better. This could be a quiet rest, and yes, that means no scrolling on your phone. Or maybe a quick nap, or even something called non-sleep deep rest and SDR. The key is giving your brain that quiet space to do its thing. The second big reason rest is vital. When you first learn something, that newly encoded information is actually pretty unstable. Think of it like wet paint. If you immediately try to paint something else right next to it with a similar color, you might smudge the first layer. In brain terms, if you immediately use the same brain systems to learn something new right after learning the first thing, what happens is that the brand new, unstable information from the first thing can get overwritten or messed up. This is called retroactive interference. Now, for kids, those memories stabilize really fast, like in just a few minutes. But for us adults, we're slower. That new information can still be unstable even after an hour, maybe even longer. So here's the practical takeaway. Make sure you take a decent break, around 10 to 20 minutes, right after you finish a solid learning session. If you're at work, try doing some really light tasks, things that don't require a lot of brain power. And ideally, wait at least an hour before you try to learn something similar to what you just finished. Even better, learn the similar stuff on a different day entirely. Give your brain a break. It's not being lazy, it's consolidating. It's making sure that new stuff sticks. Chapter 8. The power of messing up. Why failure is your best teacher. Alright, last brain hack on the list. Mistakes. I know. Making mistakes feels awful, it's scary. It can trigger the anxiety and stress we talked about. And yeah, that feeling sucks, but guess what? There's a biological reason for it, and it serves a super important purpose. When you make a mistake and you feel that rush of anxiety or stress, your brain releases chemicals called neuromodulators. Stuff like acetylcholine, and these chemicals, they dial up the activity in your brain's central attention network. So that surge in attention and that feeling of anxiety, they're basically your brain screaming at you, hey, you messed up, pay attention, you need to change something, you need to do better, be more efficient. And here's the cool part, that moment, that mistake, it creates an opportunity for neuroplasticity. Your brain is suddenly paying maximum attention and it's ready to absorb whatever happens next. It's literally primed for learning how to fix it, but there's a catch. If you make a mistake, feel that anxiety, and then you just give up, two bad things happen. You don't learn the thing you were trying to learn. And B, you are learning something. Alright, you're learning how to get discouraged. Not ideal, so what should you do instead? You need to deliberately expose yourself to a little bit of failure. Give yourself small chances to mess up because that's where the learning happens. Quiz yourself, test your understanding, don't wait until you feel perfectly ready. If you're learning a physical skill, like kicking a soccer ball, don't just kick it straight into the net every time, change the angle. Make it harder for yourself, force yourself to make a mistake. Don't wait for everything to be perfect before you try. Because when you do make that mistake, you trigger the release of those awesome neuromodulators that boost your attention, and what happens when you then do it right? That's the good stuff. You release things like dopamine. That's your brain's reward system. It makes you feel happy, it makes you feel motivated. And it solidifies the knowledge of what you just did correctly. So turning your learning into a bit of a game can work really well. It's a win-win for your brain. When you mess up, you get the attention boost needed to learn from the mistake. When you get it right, you get the reward that makes you want to do it again and remember the correct way. The next time you mess up, don't see that anxiety as a bad thing. Lean into it, use that feeling. Because that's your brain, in its own weird way, trying its absolute best to help you improve. It's literally helping you become better than you were yesterday. The wrap up: no more anger, just action. So there you have it. My little story about discovering the brain's secrets. As you can see, I'm not angry anymore. Maybe still a little bit anxious, hey, that's good for alertness. But seriously, knowing how your brain works, understanding these simple principles, that is the key. It unlocks your potential to learn faster and more effectively. It's all about those 6 things. Attention, you gotta focus. Minimize distractions, boost your focus. Alertness, you need to be awake and engaged. Try some exercise, sleep, non-negotiable for memory. Prioritize it before and after learning. Repetition, the key to making things stick. Repeat often, especially using spaced learning over days. Rest, let your brain consolidate. Take those 10 to 20-minute breaks after learning. Mistakes, your brain's alert system and opportunity creator. Embrace them, learn from them. So, next time you sit down to learn something, put the distractions away, get your focus up. Boost your alertness, maybe with a quick workout. Repeat what you're trying to learn as much as possible during that session. And crucially, come back to it again on other days. Make sure you're getting enough sleep around your learning periods, and when you mess up, don't sweat it. Accept the mistake, lean into that feeling and learn. And promise me you'll take that 10 to 20-minute rest right after you're done. Your brain will seriously thank you. Thanks for listening to my little story. Hope you learned something new. Go forth and learn like the brain hacking champ you are.